You've been living your entire life with only a fraction of your true potential. From the moment you opened your eyes as a child, the world around you started shaping your mind, teaching you what to believe, what to fear, and what to dismiss. You were trained to follow the rules, obey the system, and never question certain boundaries. But what if the greatest boundary of all was never real? What if the limits of your mind were artificially imposed to keep you from discovering a power that could change everything? A power ancient civilizations once understood. A power modern science is only beginning to glimpse. The ancient Egyptian god Thoth held knowledge so profound that it was hidden, suppressed, and buried beneath layers of myth and dogma. But now, as you listen to this, something within you stirs. You didn't find this video by accident. This video finds you when you're ready. Long before the rise of modern science, before the rigid dogmas of institutional religion took hold, there existed a body of knowledge so profound, so transformative, that it threatened the very foundations of control. This knowledge wasn't born in secret laboratories or behind closed political doors. It came from the ancient temples of Egypt, from the wisdom passed down through oral tradition and sacred initiations. At the center of this wisdom stands Thoth, known to the Greeks as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great. He was not just a god in the mythological sense. Thoth embodied the archetype of ultimate knowledge, the master of time, writing, mathematics, and, most dangerously of all, the secret mechanics of the human mind. The ancient mystery schools, hidden from the uninitiated, taught that the mind was not a passive observer of reality but an active participant in shaping it. Thoth's teachings suggested that the mind could transcend the linear experience of time, that consciousness was not locked within the brain but existed as part of a universal field, a vast intelligence connecting everything across space and time. The Emerald Tablets, attributed to Thoth, whispered of techniques that could elevate human awareness beyond the limitations of ordinary perception. These weren't abstract spiritual metaphors. They were precise methods designed to unlock latent faculties most humans never activate. But this knowledge was dangerous. Dangerous not because it was false, but because of what it made possible. An individual who awakens to their own mental sovereignty becomes uncontrollable. They no longer submit blindly to systems of external authority. They cannot be easily manipulated by fear, by propaganda, by manufactured narratives. And so, over centuries, this knowledge was buried, distorted, and dismissed as myth by the very institutions that rose to control human society. The more humanity progressed technologically, the more it regressed spiritually. As empires grew, as religions expanded, as the scientific establishment cemented its authority, the teachings of Thoth were quietly locked away, preserved only in fragments within secret orders, esoteric traditions, and whispered texts that few were permitted to study. The masses were given simple stories, tales of gods and pharaohs, of rituals and tombs, while the true essence of Thoth's wisdom remained hidden in plain sight. Because if you believe your mind is nothing more than a byproduct of biological processes, chemical reactions in the brain, you will never attempt to unlock the gates to higher states of consciousness. If you are convinced that psychic phenomena, telepathy, remote viewing, or non-linear time perception are impossible fantasies, you will never pursue them. You will police your own thoughts, dismiss your own intuition, and obediently stay within the safe confines drawn for you by those who benefit from your ignorance. But the few who sought and guarded this knowledge understood otherwise. They knew that reality is malleable. They knew that the mind, when properly trained, can perceive far beyond the limits of physical senses. This is not about supernatural superstition. It's about a science so advanced, so ancient, that modern physics is only now starting to rediscover glimpses of its principles. And while most of humanity has been programmed to scoff at these possibilities, there remains a small window where certain truths can still be explored. There are deeper aspects of Thoth's teachings that we simply cannot speak of here, for reasons that are obvious in today's tightly controlled digital landscape. But for those who are ready to go further, we share much more inside the Insights Academy newsletter, knowledge that's too controversial for YouTube. And for a limited time, new subscribers will receive a free copy of the Kybalion. The link is in the description below. The ancient initiates of Egypt were not playing with fantasies. They were mastering tools of vibrational frequency, mental projection, symbolic activation, and conscious attunement to access levels of perception that most people today can't even imagine. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this: the mechanisms for accessing these abilities still exist within you. They always have. The system simply trained you to forget. From your earliest memories, you were taught a version of reality that fit within the narrow boundaries approved by those in control. The education you received, the media you consumed, the stories you were told, all carefully constructed to steer your perception away from ideas that might threaten the established order. You were trained to associate anything outside of that narrow window with fantasy, superstition, or dangerous delusion. Psychic abilities, pseudoscience, consciousness beyond the brain, laughable, ancient wisdom, primitive myths of unsophisticated cultures. This was no accident. It was design. The system understands that to truly control a population, you don't need cages or chains. You simply need to control what people believe is possible. Once you limit their imagination, you limit their actions. Once you convince them that higher knowledge doesn't exist, they'll never even look for it. And so, you were conditioned not only to dismiss ancient teachings like those of Thoth, but to ridicule anyone who dared to take them seriously. This self-policing narrative ensures that the most powerful secrets remain hidden without the need for overt censorship. People willingly mock, shame, and ostracize those who question the official version of reality. Consider your schooling. From the very beginning, you were taught facts, pre-approved, packaged, and delivered as absolute truth. You learned what was tested, not what was questioned. The entire structure was built around memorization and regurgitation, not genuine inquiry. Curiosity was only rewarded if it stayed within safe boundaries. Anything outside was met with skepticism, dismissal, or even punishment. You weren't encouraged to explore the possibility that the mind could extend beyond the physical. You were told to focus on measurable outputs, standardized assessments, and consensus-driven truth. This created generations of individuals who not only accept their limited perception, but fiercely defend it. The media reinforced this conditioning. Movies, television, and even children's cartoons subtly embedded the narrative. Heroes save the world by restoring order, not by challenging it. Villains are those who question the system, those who tap into forbidden knowledge, those who dare to wield unconventional power. Over time, these stories build mental frameworks. You begin to associate safety with compliance and danger with independent exploration. And before you even realize it, you've internalized a deep fear of stepping beyond the acceptable range of thought. Science, too, has played its role. While marketed as the ultimate pursuit of truth, much of mainstream science functions more like a gatekeeper than a liberator. The dominant materialist paradigm frames consciousness as nothing more than brain chemistry. Anything that hints at the non-local, the psychic, or the metaphysical is labeled fringe, quackery, or pseudoscience. Researchers who dare to explore these areas often find their funding pulled, their careers sabotaged, their reputations attacked. The message is clear: stay within the safe lines, or pay the price. This systematic dismissal of ancient esoteric knowledge serves one master: control. Because the moment you awaken to the possibility that your mind is far more powerful than you were led to believe, you become unpredictable. You begin to ask dangerous questions. If thoughts can influence reality, who truly controls your fate? If consciousness isn't bound by time and space, what else have they lied to you about? If ancient wisdom contains truths modern science is only beginning to understand, what else is buried beneath the layers of distortion? By keeping you fixated on material success, external validation, and constant distraction, the system ensures you never turn your gaze inward. You chase empty achievements, always looking outward for meaning, while the real power lies dormant within you. The constant bombardment of media, advertising, and noise keeps your consciousness trapped in a narrow bandwidth. You were never taught how to still the mind, how to listen to the subtle signals, how to tune into the deeper frequencies of reality. These skills were intentionally left out of your education because they make you sovereign, and sovereignty is the system's greatest threat. Yet, even with all their efforts, cracks in the facade are beginning to show. Stories of psychic phenomena, remote viewing experiments, near-death experiences, and unexplainable synchronicities continue to emerge. Whistleblowers from within government and military programs have come forward, revealing classified research into consciousness expansion. Quantum physicists, once rigid materialists, now speculate on the nature of reality in ways that echo the teachings of ancient mystics. The truth has never fully disappeared. It waits beneath the surface, waiting for those who are ready to see. You are conditioned to dismiss this power, not because it isn't real, but because it's too real. Because if you knew what you were capable of, you'd never allow yourself to be controlled again. For centuries, you've been told that your mind is nothing more than a byproduct of your brain, a fragile, temporary flicker of awareness that dies the moment your body fails. This is the great lie that's been repeated until it became unquestioned dogma. But what if that narrative is entirely backwards? What if your brain isn't the source of your consciousness, but merely the receiver? Like a radio tuned into specific frequencies, your brain may simply be decoding a far vaster field of information that exists independently of your physical form. This is not some far-fetched spiritual metaphor. This is where ancient wisdom and emerging science quietly begin to converge. Thoth's teachings hinted at this thousands of years ago. The mind, he suggested, operates not as an isolated phenomenon but as part of a living, conscious universe. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without, wasn't poetic philosophy. It was a precise description of how reality reflects itself across scales. Your thoughts aren't contained within the confines of your skull. They exist as patterns of energy, vibrations within an interconnected field that permeates all existence. When your thoughts align with certain frequencies, you open access to higher states of awareness, intuitive knowledge, and perceptions that transcend linear time. Modern science, despite its institutional resistance, is stumbling into similar conclusions. Quantum physics, in its most honest form, has shattered the simplistic, clockwork model of the universe. The phenomenon of quantum entanglement, where two particles remain connected regardless of distance, defies the idea of separateness. Some physicists now propose that space itself may be an illusion, that what we perceive as individual objects and beings are simply localized expressions of a unified field. And yet, mainstream narratives hesitate to apply these implications to human consciousness. The moment you acknowledge that consciousness may be non-local, you open the door to everything society has taught you to reject. The mind as a receiver explains phenomena that materialist science cannot account for. Telepathy, precognition, remote viewing. These experiences defy explanation if you believe consciousness is trapped inside the brain. But if your mind is tapping into a field of information that exists beyond space and time, these abilities become not only possible but entirely natural. You've been taught to suppress the very faculties that could reveal this to you. Subtle intuitive nudges dismissed as coincidence. Déjà vu shrugged off as brain glitches. Unexplained gut feelings ignored because they don't fit the official model. The modern world bombards you with constant sensory noise, making it almost impossible to perceive the subtler frequencies. Social media feeds, news cycles, artificial lighting, electromagnetic pollution, all of it designed to keep your mind distracted and your energetic field disrupted. The less stillness you allow into your life, the harder it becomes to hear the deeper signals. But when you begin to quiet the noise, when you practice true inner stillness, you start to sense what's always been there, faint, persistent, waiting. Thoth's teachings were built upon the mastery of these vibrational realities. The initiates of ancient Egypt were trained to recognize thought as a creative force, a frequency capable of shaping both internal perception and external circumstance. Thought wasn't random mental chatter, it was directed energy. By focusing intent, visualizing outcomes, and tuning into specific frequencies, they believed the mind could access knowledge, not bound by time or physical proximity. This wasn't magic. It was science, though of a kind modern institutions still fear to acknowledge. The mind's true nature has been kept from you, not because it's unknowable, but because its discovery threatens the entire structure of control that governs your world. A sovereign mind, aware of its ability to tap into universal intelligence, can no longer be manipulated by manufactured narratives, corporate agendas, or state-sponsored fear. Such a mind becomes dangerous, independent, unpredictable, uncontrollable. And that's precisely why you've been trained to dismiss these ideas before you ever had the chance to explore them. The moment you begin to see consciousness as a vast, interconnected field, everything you've been told about your own limitations starts to unravel. Thoth's teachings weren't abstract theories or religious dogma. They were practical systems designed to activate latent abilities within the human mind, abilities that have been ridiculed, marginalized, and buried under centuries of misinformation. What most dismiss as supernatural or fantasy, the ancients approached as a form of advanced inner science. Their methods were precise, intentional, and deeply guarded for good reason. At the core of these practices is the understanding that thought is energy. Every thought you generate carries a frequency, a vibration that ripples into the wider field of reality. You've been taught that thoughts are private, contained within your skull, but in truth, they are waves interacting with the fabric of existence itself. By learning to refine the quality of your thoughts, to focus your mental energy with absolute clarity, you begin to influence both your internal state and your external experience. This is where the doorway to psychic ability begins to open. Visualization is one of the first tools initiates learn to master. But this is not the shallow visualization you hear about in self-help circles. This was a disciplined practice, involving sustained mental imagery combined with deep emotional resonance. When your mind holds a clear image, and your emotional state aligns with that image, you send a coherent signal into the field. Over time, this creates a resonance that allows you to perceive patterns and information far beyond what your senses detect. It's the beginning stage of psychic sensitivity, seeing not with your eyes, but with your mind's deeper faculties. Symbols played a crucial role in these initiations. Sacred geometry, sigils, and ancient hieroglyphs weren't just artistic expressions. They were keys to consciousness. The Eye of Horus, the Ankh, the Flower of Life, all carried encoded frequencies that acted as triggers, helping the mind enter altered states of awareness. When these symbols are meditated upon, visualized, or even embedded into ritual practice, they activate subtle shifts in brainwave states, enhancing receptivity to the non-local field of consciousness. Rituals, far from being superstitious routines, were sophisticated protocols designed to synchronize the body, mind, and energy field into harmony. Rhythm, sound, incense, posture, all contributed to altering brainwave frequencies, creating a state where deeper perceptions became accessible. This is why sound was so heavily incorporated. Chanting, toning, and the use of specific frequencies like solfeggio tones were not arbitrary. They were methods of entrainment, aligning internal vibration with universal frequencies. In these states, initiates could access knowledge, receive insights, and in some cases, perceive events across time and space. What we now call telepathy, remote viewing, precognition, or intuition were not seen as paranormal in these ancient systems. They were considered natural capabilities of a fully awakened mind. The initiates believed that time itself was not linear, but layered, a continuum of probabilities existing simultaneously. By tuning into the right frequency, the mind could momentarily step outside the narrow present moment and glimpse possibilities from other points on the timeline. This ability to access information across space and time is precisely what modern secret programs have been attempting to replicate. Remote viewing projects, once heavily classified, reveal that even within recent decades, governments have explored the very phenomena ancient traditions spoke of. But instead of empowering the public, this knowledge has often been hoarded, used for strategic advantage, and quietly dismissed in public discourse to prevent mass awakening. The tragedy is that these abilities aren't reserved for a chosen few. They exist within all of us. The reason so few people access them is not because they're rare, but because modern life actively suppresses the conditions necessary for them to emerge. The constant mental noise, the culture of instant gratification, the lack of deep focus, all keep your mind tethered to the surface layer of awareness. The system ensures you remain occupied with distractions, leaving no space for the kind of deep, sustained mental discipline that allows these abilities to surface. But once you recognize that the door is real, you cannot unsee it. You start to feel the subtle signals. You notice synchronicities that defy random chance. You sense information before it arrives. You feel connections to people, places, or events that logic cannot explain. These are not anomalies. They are fragments of your deeper capacity breaking through the surface. The same capacities Thoth taught his initiates to master. Capacities waiting for you to reclaim. The ancients spoke of a realm that exists beyond the boundaries of physical perception, a vast storehouse where every thought, action, and possibility is recorded. This is not simply a mystical idea, but a central concept that echoes through nearly every esoteric tradition across the world. Known as the Akashic Records, it represents the ultimate archive, a cosmic database where the totality of existence is inscribed. To the untrained mind, it sounds like mythology, but to those who have glimpsed its reality, it's an undeniable presence woven into the fabric of consciousness itself. Thoth's teachings spoke of such a field, though not in the language of modern science. He described realms where time dissolves and all knowledge exists simultaneously, accessible to those who have trained their minds to perceive beyond linear limitations. The Akashic Records are not bound to any one culture or religion. Ancient Indian, Tibetan, and indigenous teachings all reference similar ideas, a universal memory bank, accessible not through physical tools, but through consciousness tuned to the right frequency. Modern interpretations often trivialize this concept as fantasy, yet emerging scientific theories unintentionally brush up against its edges. The holographic universe model suggests that information may be embedded throughout the very fabric of space-time itself. Theoretical physicists who explore quantum information fields, zero-point energy, and the interconnectedness of all particles are, without fully admitting it, peering into principles that echo ancient knowledge. They propose that every piece of the universe contains within it the blueprint of the whole, much like a hologram, where each fragment contains the entire image. When Thoth's initiates trained to access this realm, they understood that the mind required a delicate balance of intense focus and complete surrender. It was not something achieved through force, but through attunement. The practitioner would first discipline their lower faculties, desires, fears, distractions, before attempting to pierce the veil of higher knowledge. Through meditation, visualization, and ritual, they would align their internal state to resonate with this greater field. In doing so, information would surface, insights, visions, and knowings that seem to arrive from beyond the boundaries of their individual experience. The Akashic Records do not communicate in words or human language. Instead, they present impressions, images, emotions, and flashes of understanding. The mind receives these like an antenna catching faint signals, which are then translated into comprehensible thoughts. This is why intuition often feels like just knowing, without being able to explain why. It's not a random hunch. It's a momentary alignment with the greater field of information you're usually blind to. When you occasionally experience déjà vu, an uncanny knowing of events before they occur, or sudden flashes of insight that feel foreign to your conscious thought process, you're brushing against this field. It's not a malfunction. It's a glimpse into a deeper structure of reality that your conscious mind is unaccustomed to processing. Thoth's teachings weren't about creating these abilities. They were about removing the barriers that block your natural access to them. The tragedy of modern life is that we've constructed a reality that actively blocks this connection. Our obsession with logic, our fear of uncertainty, and our relentless distraction keep us anchored to the surface of consciousness. We were never taught how to still the mind, to listen deeply, or to trust the subtle signals that arise from within. The education system didn't equip you with tools to access higher knowledge. It trained you to distrust your own inner knowing. Yet these records are not reserved for a spiritual elite. They remain accessible to anyone willing to cultivate the necessary awareness. This is why mystery schools existed, not to hoard power, but to ensure that only those prepared for the responsibility of higher knowledge would access it. Because with great knowledge comes great accountability. Misused, this level of perception can be dangerous, both for the individual and for others. But when approached with humility, discipline, and genuine curiosity, the Akashic field becomes a profound teacher, one that can reveal not only the nature of reality, but your place within it. As more people begin to sense these truths, the rigid walls of materialism start to crumble. The question is no longer whether this field exists, but whether you're ready to perceive it. Thoth's secret was never about worship or blind faith. It was about empowerment, about showing humanity that the keys to higher awareness have always been within reach, hidden not by distance, but by distraction. The greatest threat to any system of control is an awakened individual, someone who no longer plays by the rules, who no longer accepts the world as it has been handed to them. This is why teachings like those of Thoth have been systematically hidden, discredited, and distorted for centuries. Because if you fully understood the power that lies dormant within your mind, you would become almost impossible to govern. Not because you would rise up in violent rebellion, but because you would step outside of the very framework they use to control you. And once enough individuals do that, the entire structure begins to collapse. Throughout history, knowledge has always been the currency of power. Those who control information control perception, and those who control perception control reality itself. The ruling classes, whether they were monarchies, religious institutions, or modern corporations, have understood this for thousands of years. It is not enough to simply withhold knowledge. They must convince you that the knowledge itself is dangerous, laughable, or evil. This is the most effective form of censorship, making you complicit in dismissing your own potential. Look at how esoteric teachings have been treated throughout time. Hermeticism, Gnosticism, alchemy, all traditions that carried echoes of Thoth's original wisdom, were persecuted, driven underground, and branded as heresy. Entire libraries were destroyed, their texts burned to erase inconvenient truths. Religious institutions preached that seeking personal spiritual power was a path to damnation. Instead, they offered tightly controlled dogmas, where authority was external and salvation could only be granted by intermediaries. You were taught to submit, to obey, and to fear the very abilities that would make you sovereign. As scientific materialism rose to dominance, a new kind of gatekeeping emerged. The language changed, but the strategy remained. Consciousness was reframed as a chemical accident, an emergent property of neurons firing in your brain. The idea of psychic abilities was relegated to the fringes of pseudoscience, mocked by the academic establishment and entertainment media alike. Popular culture portrayed psychic phenomena as either childish fantasy or dangerous delusion. Anyone who claimed to have intuitive experiences was dismissed as gullible or insane. This social ridicule became a self-sustaining form of control. People censored themselves to avoid being ostracized. But behind closed doors, the story is different. Classified military programs explored remote viewing and psychic espionage. Intelligence agencies quietly funded experiments into telepathy, precognition, and mind-influencing technologies. The very institutions that publicly mocked these abilities were privately investigating them for decades. Why? Because they know the potential is real. They know that the human mind, when properly trained, can access information in ways that defy conventional understanding of time and space. And if these abilities can be harnessed strategically, they become powerful tools of influence and control. The paradox is striking. You've been trained to dismiss what your rulers secretly pursue. You've been conditioned to see your own potential as absurd, while they quietly explore its limits. This is not about science versus superstition. It's about access versus restriction. Power structures cannot allow widespread empowerment because true empowerment decentralizes authority. When individuals reclaim their sovereignty of mind, they stop reacting predictably. They stop consuming out of fear. They stop following narratives fed to them. They start thinking for themselves. An empowered population no longer needs constant supervision. They no longer blindly follow leaders or institutions. They no longer fall for fabricated crises designed to keep them in a state of panic. This kind of independence terrifies those in power. Because when people realize that consciousness is not bound to biology or authority, but is instead connected to a greater universal intelligence, control slips away. It becomes impossible to keep people trapped inside artificial constructs of reality when they have learned to step outside of it entirely. This is why the ancient knowledge of Thoth was hidden. Not because it was untrue, but because it was too true. It represented a key to unlocking human freedom at a level that would dismantle hierarchies of power. It threatened not just governments and religions, but the entire economic machinery built on dependency, fear, and ignorance. A society of awakened individuals doesn't endlessly consume, doesn't submit blindly, and doesn't tolerate exploitation. That is the true danger. And that is why, even now, so few are willing to speak of it openly. As the rigid walls of materialist science begin to show their cracks, even some of the most skeptical minds are forced to confront questions they've long avoided. For centuries, science positioned itself as the final authority on truth, dismissing ancient teachings as nothing more than superstition. But now, in the quiet corners of modern physics and consciousness studies, echoes of Thoth's wisdom are resurfacing, unintentionally, reluctantly, but undeniably. What was once ridiculed as mystical fantasy is beginning to mirror the findings of some of today's most groundbreaking scientific explorations. At the heart of this convergence lies quantum physics, a field so strange, so paradoxical, that even its most brilliant pioneers admitted their confusion. Subatomic particles that exist in multiple states simultaneously, that influence each other instantaneously across vast distances, that behave differently when observed. All of this defies the classical understanding of reality as fixed and predictable. The deeper scientists peer into the quantum world, the more reality begins to resemble something fluid, responsive, and fundamentally interconnected. These discoveries challenge the core assumption that consciousness is separate from the fabric of the universe. Instead, they hint at the possibility that consciousness may be woven into the very structure of existence itself. Thoth's teachings align with this perspective in a way that is impossible to ignore. The Hermetic principle of mentalism, the all is mind, suggests that everything originates from consciousness. Reality itself is a projection, a manifestation of thought, vibration, and intention. Modern scientists speak of information fields, holographic principles, and multidimensional models that sound eerily familiar to those who have studied esoteric traditions. The holographic universe theory, for example, proposes that the entire cosmos operates like a giant projection, where every part contains the blueprint of the whole. This mirrors ancient beliefs that the macrocosm and microcosm are reflections of one another, a foundational concept in Hermetic philosophy. Even the controversial idea of the multiverse, where multiple timelines and realities coexist, reflects the ancient view of time as non-linear and fluid. Thoth taught that time was not a straight line but a field of possibilities, accessible through conscious alignment. In this model, past, present, and future coexist, and what we experience as reality is simply the result of where our consciousness is tuned at any given moment. When modern theoretical physicists speculate about parallel realities and branching timelines, they are unknowingly walking in the footsteps of mystics who explored these concepts long ago through direct experience rather than mathematical equations. Beyond the quantum world, neuroscience itself is beginning to stumble towards similar revelations. Studies in neuroplasticity, the placebo effect, and the profound impact of belief on physical reality suggest that the mind holds a power that extends far beyond passive observation. The placebo effect alone, where mere belief triggers real physiological changes, offers a glimpse into how thought influences matter. Thoth's teachings framed this not as an anomaly, but as a natural consequence of a mind aligned with universal laws. Parapsychology, though still marginalized, has accumulated decades of data on remote viewing, telepathy, and precognition. Controlled studies have demonstrated statistical anomalies that suggest information can be perceived beyond the conventional boundaries of space and time. Governments have secretly funded such research, only to dismiss it publicly to maintain their grip on acceptable narratives. But the data remains, quietly validating what ancient wisdom keepers have always known. Even near-death experiences, long dismissed as hallucinations, offer consistent reports of consciousness existing independent of the physical body. Individuals report encounters with timeless realms, access to knowledge beyond their own experience, and an overwhelming sense of interconnectedness, all consistent with the idea that consciousness exists as part of a greater field. These reports mirror descriptions found in Hermetic texts and ancient Egyptian teachings of the afterlife, where the soul transitions into higher realms of existence not bound by earthly limitations. The irony is staggering. For centuries, ancient knowledge was mocked as primitive myth, and yet, as modern science reaches into the deepest layers of reality, it repeatedly arrives at conclusions that have been quietly preserved in esoteric teachings all along. The more we learn, the more it becomes clear that reality is not a rigid, mechanical structure, but a living, conscious field, one that responds to thought, intention, and awareness. The system will continue to resist these implications, because to fully embrace them would require dismantling the entire framework of control that depends on keeping you small, fearful, and disconnected. But the cracks are growing, the knowledge is surfacing, and for those willing to see beyond the programmed limits, the ancient teachings of Thoth no longer seem like distant myth. They feel like a roadmap home. The first step to reclaiming what was hidden from you is not found in complex rituals or rare initiations. It begins with something far more subtle, yet far more difficult in a world engineered to distract you: awareness. You cannot access higher levels of consciousness while your mind is hijacked by endless notifications, artificial urgency, and emotional manipulation. The system's most effective weapon has always been noise, keeping your attention scattered, your nervous system overstimulated, and your mind too fatigued to ever explore the deeper layers of your own being. But once you recognize the pattern, you begin to disrupt it. Stillness becomes your greatest ally. In stillness, you create the internal space where subtle information can rise. It's here that you first begin to notice the faint signals that most overlook. Your intuition sharpens. Synchronicities become more frequent. Patterns in events start to reveal themselves. What once appeared as coincidence now feels deliberate, as if reality itself is responding to your shifting awareness. This is not imagination, it's resonance. You are tuning your consciousness, and the field responds accordingly. The most profound practices for awakening these latent abilities are deceptively simple, but require consistent discipline. Meditation is not merely a relaxation technique, it is a training ground for your consciousness. In deep states of meditation, the brain shifts into slower frequencies, theta and delta waves, where the boundary between conscious and subconscious dissolves. In these states, access to non-local information becomes possible. What begins as flashes of intuition can evolve into sustained perception of insights that your ordinary mind cannot explain. Visualization is another critical tool. When practiced correctly, visualization is not just about seeing images in your mind. It's about engaging all your senses and emotional states to create a fully immersive internal experience. Your mind does not distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and physical reality. The more you immerse yourself in visualizations with emotional conviction, the more your consciousness aligns with those frequencies. Over time, you begin to notice an increased sensitivity to information that seems to arise from nowhere, an expansion of your perceptual bandwidth. Limiting your exposure to low-frequency media becomes essential. The content you consume shapes your vibrational state. News designed to provoke fear, entertainment that glorifies dysfunction, and social media engineered to exploit your insecurities all serve to entrench you in lower states of consciousness. Detoxing from these inputs is not a luxury, it's a prerequisite. You cannot attune to higher frequencies while constantly ingesting narratives designed to keep you small. Surrounding yourself with individuals who encourage authenticity and critical thought accelerates your growth. The system thrives on isolation because isolated individuals are easy to control. But authentic communities create resonance fields that amplify awakening. When you engage in conversations that explore these deeper truths, you strengthen your own awareness. Collective inquiry opens doors that solitary reflection often cannot. As your awareness sharpens, you begin to trust your intuitive impressions. You stop dismissing the subtle nudges that once seemed random. You notice how certain people or places carry distinct energetic signatures. You sense shifts in situations before they fully unfold. The boundaries of linear time feel less rigid. These are not supernatural gifts. They are simply the natural result of a mind that is beginning to function as it was always intended. The key is to balance critical thinking with openness. Skepticism that automatically dismisses all unexplainable phenomena is as dangerous as blind belief. True discernment lies in maintaining curiosity while rigorously observing your own experiences. As you practice, you will inevitably encounter moments of doubt. That is part of the process. The system conditioned you to distrust your own perceptions, and unlearning that takes time. But as your experiences accumulate, the weight of personal evidence becomes undeniable. You were never broken. You were simply conditioned to operate at a fraction of your potential. The methods that Thoth taught his initiates remain as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. They do not require temples or hierarchies. They require only your attention, your discipline, and your willingness to challenge the boundaries that were placed around your mind. As you step into this process, you realize that awakening is not a destination but a continuous unfolding. Each layer of awareness reveals another, like nested realities waiting to be discovered. The path ahead is not without obstacles. There will be moments where the pull of old habits and the weight of cultural programming attempt to draw you back into complacency. But with each breakthrough, the pull of the old weakens, your resilience grows, your connection to the greater field strengthens. And the more you reclaim your sovereignty of mind, the more impossible it becomes for anyone to manipulate you again. The system has always relied on one fundamental truth: isolated individuals are easy to control. Divide people by ideology, class, race, or belief, and you keep them distracted long enough to prevent any real shift in collective awareness. But isolation only works when people remain asleep. The moment enough individuals awaken to their true nature, something remarkable begins to happen. The collective field of consciousness starts to shift, and with it, the entire structure of control starts to crumble. This is not theory. It is observable, measurable, and inevitable. When one person breaks free from the artificial boundaries imposed upon their mind, they don't just free themselves, they create ripples that influence others. Conversations begin to change. The questions people dare to ask become more profound. Topics once dismissed as fringe or forbidden slowly move into mainstream dialogue. The cultural narratives that once seemed absolute begin to erode, replaced by new stories that empower instead of enslave. You've already seen glimpses of this. More people than ever are questioning the nature of consciousness, exploring ancient wisdom, and recognizing that the rigid models of reality handed down to them no longer explain their lived experiences. This is why the system fights so aggressively to maintain the illusion. Every piece of propaganda, every manufactured crisis, every tool of distraction is designed to keep you focused on division, fear, and external threats. Because if your focus remains outward, you will never turn inward to discover where true power resides. But the cracks are spreading. The old structures are becoming harder to maintain. And no amount of censorship or manufactured fear can suppress what is rising. As more people step into their authentic power, the very fabric of society begins to reconfigure itself. Economies driven by exploitation begin to weaken, as individuals reject consumerism as a measure of self-worth. Media empires built on fear and outrage lose influence, as people seek out narratives that resonate with truth. Political systems designed to polarize lose their grip as more individuals recognize that real change begins not with external leaders, but within themselves. A sovereign population cannot be easily manipulated by the same tired strategies of division and distraction. What emerges is not chaos, but a higher order, a culture rooted in awareness, compassion, and genuine freedom. A world where decisions are made from clarity rather than fear, where communities are built on shared purpose rather than blind loyalty to institutions, where knowledge is shared openly, not hoarded by the few, and where the concept of leadership transforms from authority over others to responsibility for collective well-being. This is the revolution that truly terrifies those who have long held power, because it requires no violence, no external battle. It spreads through the simple act of individuals reclaiming their minds. It grows with every conversation that dares to question the old narratives. It strengthens every time someone chooses presence over distraction, intuition over blind obedience, curiosity over dogma. You have felt the pull of this awakening, or you would not be here. You did not stumble onto this knowledge by accident. The fact that you are still listening is evidence that something within you has already begun to stir. And while the path ahead will challenge everything you've been taught to believe, it also offers something no external system can ever provide: genuine freedom. What I've shared here barely scratches the surface. Inside Insights Academy, we go far deeper into the knowledge that cannot be fully revealed here. Some truths are simply too sensitive for open platforms. If you're serious about reclaiming your mind and stepping fully into this path, join us through the link in the description. And yes, for a limited time, you'll still receive a free copy of The Kybalion when you sign up. Don't wait until you're ready, because ready is a decision. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."